I've been painting for thousands of hours, so should I buy an airbrush? Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, another Wonders of discussional video, and in this one we're going to talk about should you buy an airbrush. Before that though, if you would like to keep up to date with the wonders of Warhammer 40k, then please give me a sub and hit the bell button so you don't miss an upload. Okay, so let's have a chilled chit chat about airbrushes or airbrushing. Now, it's fair to say that I've never used one, I don't own one. I only ever use my manual paint brushes to paint my miniatures, and I absolutely love it. So what is the reason that I don't own an airbrush? And I suppose the first topic we need to talk about is airbrushing cheating? Okay, so first of all, I just want to clarify that I don't think airbrushing is cheating. I also don't think it has a lower skill level than painting with a brush. It's just that so far in my hobby career, I haven't been tempted to get an airbrush. And I'm just thinking about that, and why is that? Why haven't I bought myself an airbrush yet? So one reason has to be the cost, not necessarily the cost of the actual airbrush itself, because you can get some very cheap, inexpensive airbrushes, certainly good enough for when you're starting out, and obviously as you get more experience you can buy better airbrushes. But the other thing of course is the compressor. Now this is probably just showing my ignorance because I'm not 100% sure, but I think the compressor is the more expensive side of airbrushing, and also physically taking up more space, and also the noisier side of airbrushing. When you're in a family home where you don't really want to be making too much noise when you're painting, that can be a bit of a problem. So those things have put me off a little bit. Now I don't think the cost is coming into it too much, because I'm quite happy to spend £10 on a paintbrush, and if I'm buying say 10 paintbrushes over a number of years, that soon adds up. So I don't think it's necessarily the cost which is holding me back, but certainly the noise level and the space for the compressor, and the ignorance, basically the lack of knowledge regarding actually painting with it. Now this is also coupled with the current projects that I do. So all of my armies, apart from the brand new Chaos Army which I've got coming up next year, are at least half painted, and they're all painted with a brush. Now if I start airbrushing those models as I continue painting them, I'm going to get a totally different look. So that is one reason why I'm not bothering with an airbrush also, because I don't want to have an army which is going to look different. I want everything to look the same. Having said that, I could of course do certain things with the airbrush and keep that consistency within the army. And one of those things of course is priming, or indeed going one step further, base coating your models, getting ready to put on all of those washes and details and highlights, etc. And I have to admit, certainly for the priming side of things, whenever I'm priming a model with my can of primer, I'm always thinking to myself, I wish I had an airbrush when I'm priming the models. So that is the only time that I find myself thinking I wish I had an airbrush. So if I did own an airbrush, I certainly could still use it, especially as I said for those primers and maybe for the base coating. But how about for all of those highlights and stuff? Let's just say I've got my new Emperor's Children army and I decide to paint it with an airbrush. Now it's going to take me a while to get good with that airbrush. I'm going to need a lot of practice. Now, I already feel that I'm pretty decent with my manual brush. So I know I could get cracking on that army and paint it to a high level. But if I had an airbrush, I'd need a lot of practice. I'd need to learn a lot of techniques and how to use the airbrush. And potentially, if I did have a cheaper airbrush, maybe I just couldn't potentially get such a high quality with that airbrush. In actual fact, the army may look rubbish. But even if I did get really good with that airbrush and I made a great job on my Emperor's Children army, there is still something inside of me that just doesn't like the look of an airbrushed army. Now we are going to delve a bit deeper in a minute on that. But whenever I see an airbrushed army on the table, even though it may look awesome, whenever I look at it, if I can tell that it's been airbrushed, I just get this feeling inside of me that says, well yeah, it looks great, but it's been airbrushed. I personally love to see armies that have been done with a brush. They may not look quite so professional, but I think they definitely look more artistic. And I think that's one thing about the airbrush. I think you can get incredibly skillful with the airbrush as you can get incredibly skillful with your paintbrush. But personally, I feel the airbrush just isn't quite as artistic as using a paintbrush. And that's what I want to delve a little bit deeper into. because I've been thinking about this quite a lot recently. Why do I actually feel like this? Because let's face it, doesn't matter what your tool is, you are artistic. It doesn't matter how easy a tool is to use. You've still got to use that tool. You still have to make that thing come to life. Whether you're using stencils and you're using masking, or whether you're using weathering techniques, etc. It's all skill. It's all artistic. But like I said, I don't necessarily feel like that. And I have delved deeper into my mind and I've worked out why. So when I first got into the hobby, I went out and I bought my models. I came home, I had to look at the artwork on the box, thought wow, they look awesome. Had to look at all the models in the codex, all the models in the White Dwarf, and thought wow, I can't wait to get painting these. How am I going to paint them? Bearing in mind this was probably about 15 years ago, way before YouTube and blogs and tutorials, etc. At least what I knew about anyway. All I had to go on was the box art. And on the back of the box art, it gave you an indication of the colours they used. Usually it was just 3 colours. So what do? You go out, you buy those 3 colours and you start painting them as the instructions say on the back. And they come out absolutely nothing like the artwork. And then you soon realise that actually GW are not telling the truth. That's not the colours that artist used to paint that model. Now they are a lot better these days. They're very, very open on how to paint stuff. Some fantastic tutorials, and the Warhammer TV tutorials are awesome. They're very, very open on how to paint stuff. But I just felt like in those days they weren't very open. It felt like they didn't really want you to paint the models to that level. It's like all quite top secret. And on top of that, when you looked at all of the models in these magazines, in the White Dwarf, they look absolutely amazing. So amazing that you think to yourself, they've been airbrushed. There's no way that that person could have painted that with a brush. This is how I felt back in those days. And I think from then on, I got this thing inside me that airbrushing is cheating. Now I know I said that airbrushing isn't cheating, and it's not. I don't believe that. But at the time, that's how I felt. And I think that was the stem of me not really liking airbrushes or airbrushing too much. Now of course, we're many, many years later, and the big question is, should I get into airbrushing? I'm very happy with my paintbrushes. I've got a lot of skill with my paintbrushes, but I've got a lot more skills to learn with the paintbrushes. I've always said to myself, well, once I'm really, really happy with my paintbrush to the point that I think I can pretty much achieve anything that I want with the paintbrush, well, maybe then I will look at an airbrush. Or is that not the right way to think? I mean, even Clayton from 33 Clay Dog, who's the most amazing painter with his paintbrush, even he is using an airbrush over the last few years, and he's absolutely kicking out some fantastic models, but more importantly at a much quicker rate. And that is obviously the benefit of an airbrush. It's the speed of an airbrush. Now having said that, I've seen quite a few people using airbrushes and tutorials and stuff on airbrushes, and it seems to me that there is quite a lot of hassle regarding airbrushing. Having to clean out your airbrush when you're changing from one colour to the other, having to clean out before you put the new colour in. For me personally, I don't know exactly how much time I'm going to get to paint in a given painting session. I might only get 20 minutes. So have I got time to set up that airbrush and then to clean the airbrush out? Well, I can just get my paint set out and just get some paint on my brush and just start painting, and then just wash my brush out and put it away straight away. So there is that side of it as well. And certainly, although I have a lot of patience for painting, I don't know that I've got a lot of patience for things like masking. I don't know that I would want to spend half an hour masking a model before I get my airbrush out and painting it. I don't know whether I would find that enjoyable. Certainly not as enjoyable as just sitting down with my paintbrush and just zoning out and just enjoying my painting. And I think that's the thing, it's obviously personal preference. However, I am very interested to hear your thoughts on this. Am I missing out by not having an airbrush? Should I be considering an airbrush, or should I just carry on using my paintbrushes for the rest of my painting career? Let me know what you think. Beam me up.